Now, as the name of the video implies, this is part 12 of a story, so if you haven't seen all the previous parts, or any at all, this likely won't make any sense to you. So I'll include a link to all previous parts in the description below, so you can either start to catch up or check out the first episode to see if you like it. And now, without any further ado, let's get back to the story. We pick up right where we left off, in Palpatine's office late at night, where Plagueis has just entered, telling his old apprentice that they have much to discuss. And now we watch as Palpatine, red saber ignited, but down at his side and not at the ready, slowly moves out from behind his desk as he says, "We have nothing to discuss, my former master." Plagueis grins and responds,
"Oh, but we do, apprentice. We must talk about what you have helped create."
Palpatine now grins from ear to ear and says,
"You speak of what Kenobi is becoming."
Plagueis says back quickly,
"No, I speak of what he has already become, for he is Revan."
Palpatine's grin disappears.
"Impossible. He only wears the mask of Revan, which contains little more than a dark side remnant of him. It makes him stronger with the dark side, but nothing more. Besides, I was under the impression you were the one who gave him that mask in the first place, as part of your plan to fool me, a plan that failed my former master."
Plagueis' look is angry, and it takes much for him to keep his composure as he says,
"No, you are wrong. We have both been wrong about what has been truly transpiring this whole time. For while we plotted against each other and used Kenobi as a pawn, there was one using all of us. Kenobi and Revan are now one and the same, but it will not be long until there is only Revan. And when that happens, we will have lost."
Palpatine looks angry, and we see the grip on his saber tighten as he says,
"And how do I know this is not yet another test from my former master? You are always so fond of your tests."
Plagueis gives a slight grin.
"This is a test, but not one of my design, but rather a final test of the dark side itself. One where the victor shall be the chosen one to receive its full power and rule this galaxy. Revan believes he has already been chosen, but I feel differently."
Palpatine once more gives a slight grin.
"As do I. What is it you propose?" "First," Plagueis says, "you must hear what it is Revan proposes to both of us."
Palpatine looks a bit confused.
"You spoke to him?"
Plagueis gives a nod of the head.
"He came to me in the Sith shrine below the old Jedi temple and told me I was to bow before him or be destroyed."
Palpatine almost gives a chuckle.
"And I assume you did indeed bow before him."
Plagueis snarls and says,
"And you would be wise to bow before him too. His power is great."
Palpatine shakes his head.
"Kenobi has been my apprentice for nearly a decade now. I have never felt such power from him."
Plagueis grins.
"Of course you haven't, because you have not looked for it or truly expected it from him. Overconfidence has always been your greatest weakness, and you will ultimately be destroyed by it, apprentice."
Palpatine now snarls before saying,
"And what is it Darth Revan, your master, proposes?"
Plagueis then says,
"He wishes to rebuild the Sith Empire of old, and for us to follow him, which I suggest we do for now."
Palpatine then eyes him keenly for a long moment and says,
"And then you suggest we work together to destroy him?"
Plagueis says nothing to that, but the silence seems to be the only answer Palpatine needs.
"And then once he is destroyed, you and I shall finish our rivalry once and for all. Is that it?"
Again, Plagueis says nothing, but the silence is again the only answer Palpatine needs, and he says,
"Why not simply destroy him now, while Kenobi is still a part of him, a weak part of him?"
Plagueis nods, as if he understands that reasoning, but then says,
"There is but one problem. Revan knows where the Chosen One is hiding. Where it is, his power grows under the teachings of Dooku. And Revan says he will need our help in destroying the Chosen One."
Palpatine looks confused by all of that and asks,
"If he is so powerful, why does he need our help in destroying him?"
Plagueis responds,
He did not say, but I sensed there was a connection, and a deep one, between Revan and Anakin Skywalker. One Revan himself likely does not fully understand, yet is aware of.
Palpatine scoffs. What possible connection could there be between the two of them? And how could he not know what it is, yet knows he needs us to destroy the Chosen One?
Plagueis responds,
I am unsure, but my feelings on this matter were clear, I assure you, apprentice.
The two are then quiet for a long moment, and they just stare at each other, both looking ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Finally, Plagueis says,
I can only guess Revan senses something about the Chosen One, but cannot figure out what it is. And whatever he senses, he fears he cannot defeat.
That too makes little sense, Palpatine snaps back.
Perhaps, Plagueis agrees, but he said once the Chosen One was destroyed, he was certain he would be able to destroy Kenobi for good, and hence fully return.
For a long moment, Palpatine is quiet and in deep thought before saying,
So, if we destroy Revan now, we may lose our chance to find the Chosen One before he becomes too powerful enough to fulfill his destiny and destroy the Sith.
But if we help Revan destroy him now, he may become too powerful to ever be dealt with. The two are then quiet for another long moment before Palpatine finally says,
I believe the answer is obvious, isn't it, my old master?
Plagueis nods and simply says,
It is. We yield to Revan now, and then destroy him and the Chosen One together.
We then switch scenes and move to a different part of Coruscant and get a shot of the outside of Padme's apartment in the middle of the night before we're taken to the balcony where we see Padme staring off at the endless city beyond. And in her hand, which we now focus on, we see she holds the Japper snippet that Anakin gave her so many years ago. We then suddenly hear a voice from behind her say, I'm surprised you're not in bed yet. Padme jumps a bit and then whirls around and sees Obi-Wan standing a few paces behind her. I didn't hear you come in, she says. Where have you been all night? Obi-Wan opens his mouth like he's going to answer, but he says nothing, and he suddenly looks very confused and like he's trying his hardest to remember. It's Padme who then says, What is going on with you lately? Even when you're not off fighting some battle for the Mandalorians or the Chancellor or the Republic or whoever or whatever it is you're truly fighting for, you're never really even here. Obi-Wan then gives her a smile and says as he starts to walk towards her, My loyalty is to you above all else, and... But Obi-Wan stops himself as he notices what Padme has in her hand, the Japper snippet, to which Padme immediately tries to stuff it into the pocket of her robe. Obi-Wan then stops moving towards her, sighs, and says, My loyalty is with you, but I do wonder where yours lies. With you, of course, Padme says as she quickly moves towards him, but Obi-Wan holds out a hand to stop her from getting too close. Tell me, what is it about him you just can't let go of? Do those few days you spent with him all those years ago mean more to you than all the years you spent with me? Padme fiercely shakes her head. Of course not. How could you even say that? Obi-Wan glances at the pocket of her robe. I asked you years ago to get rid of that thing. Padme quickly retaliates. It was a gift from a scared little boy, nothing more. Obi-Wan gives a sad smile and turns around and says, As you know, I first met Satine when I was a Padawan under Qui-Gon, and the two of us spent over a year together on the run, never knowing what day might be our last. In that time, me and Satine fell in love, though neither of us could admit it at the time because we felt like we had so many other responsibilities to tend to. But when Qui-Gon chose Anakin over me, I was mad yet relieved. It gave me an excuse to leave the Order and be with the woman I love. Obi-Wan then turns around, and we now see that there are tears welling up in his eyes. And I did love her, more than I ever thought I could love anything. We now see that there are also tears welling up in Padme's eyes as Obi-Wan goes on. You used to say you had to fight for my love, against her memory, and I know that wasn't easy for you, but neither was letting Satine go for me. But I did let her go, for you, and all I ask from you in return is to let go of Anakin, a boy you barely knew from a lifetime ago. Padme then lowers her head as the tears start to fall, and after a few moments, she reaches into her pocket and pulls out the Japper snippet and hands it to Obi-Wan. But when Obi-Wan reaches out to take it, and as soon as his hand touches it, there is a flash, and we suddenly see a hazy image of Bastila holding a baby, and the look upon her face is grim. She then says, seemingly to us, for we are looking at her through the eyes of someone else, "Just what are we going to do? This illness will claim his life, and soon, and no one can figure out what it even is, much less how to cure it." Her head then lowers, and she says, "It's almost as if the Force itself works against us, and wants to claim him." She raises her head then, and looks right into our eyes as she says, "Perhaps we should let it. Who are we to work against the will of the Force? Maybe he has a purpose beyond this life." We then hear the one whose eyes we look through say, "No, what purpose could there be in death for him? We will find a cure, no matter how far and wide we have to search. Even if I have to fight the Force itself to save him, our son will not die. I promise you that." A smile, one that is grim yet hopeful, then touches the face of Bastila as she asks, "Where do we even start?" The voice, which is no doubt Revan, then says, "We will find the first Jedi Temple, and any answers that may be hidden there." There is then another flash, and we are still looking through the eyes of Revan, but now find ourselves on the island of the first Jedi Temple, looking at a child, maybe around the age of 4, playing in a small field. We then hear the voice of Bastila come from right next to us say, "I thought we were going to lose him, but it seems the illness has subsided, at least for the time being. I have to ask, what did you do?" After a moment of silence, we hear Revan say, "These little green beings that live on the planet, they have a connection with the Force unlike any other species I've ever come across." Out of the corner of our eyes, we see Bastila nod. "I agree, but what does that have to do with our son?" Again, Revan is silent for a long moment before saying, "I took one of them, and have been experimenting upon him, and through my experiments I have learned much, and it seems I've learned to keep our son alive, for now." For a long moment then, Bastila looks absolutely horrified, but she then shuts her eyes tight, and when she again opens them, her face looks calm and resolute. "These beings trust us," she says. "Some have even become our friends, and started training to be a Jedi, to be members of our new order." Revan then quickly says, "I know, and I agree, some of them could become great Jedi, but it was the only way I could think of, and I only took one of them, and so far, no one seems to have noticed he's even missing." Bastila looks in deep thought for a moment, and that's when we hear Revan chuckle and say, "You see, even you didn't notice one was gone." Bastila frowns and then says, "And just what are you doing to him?" Revan responds, "You'd rather not know. Let's just say that I learned many unnatural techniques in my time as a Sith, for pulling a being apart, finding out what makes them tick, and then putting them back together again. And I think I figured out why these beings live so long, and used that knowledge to help our son fight off the illness. Again, at least for now." Bastila then asks, "And what about this poor little creature? What has become of him?" We hear Revan sigh, and then his eyes shut, and everything goes dark for us. "I don't know. He's fallen into some type of coma now. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. It's almost like the Force is protecting him, and keeping him alive in some type of stasis. For all I know, he could be like that for hours, days, weeks, or even thousands of years, and then wake up one day and carry on as normal." And then our eyes again open, and we are still looking upon Bastila, only now we are looking up at her, and she is a shimmering blue Force ghost. We are also no longer on the island of the first Jedi Temple, but in the swamps of Dagobah, and the eyes we are looking through are those of Master Yoda, and we hear him say, "Ready, I feel I almost am." We then pull back and see Yoda and the Force ghost of Bastila walking through the swamps of Dagobah and towards the entrance of the dark side cave. "I agree," Bastila then says. "You are almost ready to enter the cave and face and destroy the darkness that has been amassing there, the darkness that stands ready to be used by the emissary of the dark side, much like the darkness in the Sith shrine on Coruscant was released upon the Jedi by Palpatine right before the attack on the temple, where you were the only one not affected." Yoda gives a nod of the head and says, "Seen darkness like that before, I had. Ready for it, I was. And ready for this next test, I will be." Bastila then says, "All paths are coming together now. Soon the Force will either stand in balance, or be left in ruins. On us true servants of the light, all now depends." With his eyes locked on the dark side cave before him, Yoda gives a nod of the head and says, "Left are many places like this, where amassed the dark side has?" Bastila shakes her head. "There is but one more place like this left in the galaxy, on the planet Mustafar, but it will not be up to you to face that test, my old friend. Instead, when you defeat the evil within this cave, when you overcome all your fear, you will join the Force and, with Qui-Gon and myself, destroy the dark side power that feeds places like this one. That has always been your destiny. We then switch scenes and find ourselves back in Padme's apartment and see Obi-Wan lying unconscious on the floor and Padme over him, looking worried, doing all she can to wake him up. Finally, Obi-Wan's eyes do open and Padme breathes a sigh of relief and then helps him to his feet. "What happened?" she asks him, but Obi-Wan only shakes his head and says, "I'm not really sure. My only guess is that when Anakin made you that necklace, he poured all his admiration for you into it and unknowingly enchanted it or something. I don't know, I've never felt anything like that." He then sighs. "Unfortunately, the only one who may have had answers is dead, that being Quinlan Vos. This was always his sort of thing." Padme, apparently without even thinking, then asks, "And how can you be so sure he's dead?" Obi-Wan doesn't answer, but the blank expression on his face says it all. He was the one that killed him. And it's at that moment that Padme suddenly becomes very faint and looks like she's about to pass out, and likely would have fallen over if Obi-Wan hadn't quickly moved to catch her. "What is it? What's wrong?" Obi-Wan asks. But Padme doesn't answer. Instead, after a moment to collect herself, she pulls away from Obi-Wan and says, "You're going to kill him, aren't you? Anakin, I mean." Obi-Wan sighs and then says, "He has become a very great threat." Padme shakes her head. "To who or what?" "To the Republic," Obi-Wan replies. "To the peace and security of this galaxy." Padme again shakes her head. "I don't believe that. I can't." Slowly, we see Obi-Wan start to get angry, and his anger seems to boil over when he notices she is wearing the Jabber snippet. Padme, seemingly surprised herself, puts her hands over it and says, shaking her head vehemently, "No, I'm sorry, I didn't even realize I'd put it back on." Obi-Wan, his eyes locked on the necklace, then retrieves his lightsaber from his belt and ignites it, and for a long moment, with his burnt and scarred face looking utterly terrifying in the red glow of the saber, he stands there and just stares at her. He then, in one quick motion, raises the saber over his head, moves towards her, and swings it down upon her. And as we pull back and away from Obi-Wan's angry face, we see Padme standing there shaking, and there's just the slightest burn mark on her clothing left by the lightsaber, and at her feet are the charred remains of the Jabber snippet. Obi-Wan then deactivates the saber and turns and just marches away. And that is where this part ends. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of this part of the story and what you think might happen next. So leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.